Mark, you and I have spoken at length about all of the attacks on democracy in North Carolina at the hands of Republicans there. We finally have some good news being handed down from that state. Can you explain what just happened?
Yeah, so the North Carolina Court of Appeals just ruled that another effort by the Republican legislature in that state to strip the governor of the power to appoint the state board of elections and the county board of elections is unconstitutional under the state constitution. I mean, this is now the second major effort that Republicans in that state have done to try to strip Democratic governors of the ability to appoint these positions. And it is the second time that they have run into trouble in the courts. This one's notable because, the Court of Appeals in North Carolina is leans very Republican.
Right, it's a 5-2 court.
But this was a 2-1 decision in favor of the new governor. So that's good news for democracy.
And so what were Republicans seeking to do, and what's going to be the law of the land as of right now?
Okay, so this is how desperate Republicans are to be able to cheat on elections. Their first gambit was to say that the legislature gets to appoint the members of the 5-person board of elections. And the counties, there are county boards as well, and that they get to appoint the chair. Okay, that was their gambit. Very straightforward. We want the power. We don't want the Democrats to have the power, so we're just going to take the power.
Yeah.
The state Supreme Court said no, can't do that because this is not a legislative function. This is an executive branch function. Administering elections belongs in the executive branch. It has to be with the governor. You might think the Republican legislature would then go about doing other things, but oh no, they came back. And they decided that they would shift the power here, since they couldn't take it to themselves, to, wait for it, the state auditor. Because it turns out that the auditor in North Carolina is a Republican. So they moved the power. They said, okay, we have to put it in the executive branch. We'll put it with the auditor. And the auditor happens to be a Republican. Now, I pulled up the auditor.nc.gov, and it says the North Carolina Office of State Auditor is your fiscal watchdog. We audit more than $100 billion in state assets and liabilities every year, bringing transparency to local, state, and federal government. Their mission is to.
Why wouldn't that person be in charge of the state?
Right? Why wouldn't they appoint the state board of elections? Why wouldn't they appoint all the county boards of elections? Well, the answer is because it's not just as the Court of Appeal said. It is not just that it can't be the legislature. But this is actually a power of the governor. They can't be like, you know what, governor, you have a pardon power, but we no longer want you to have it, so we're now giving it to the auditor.
The auditor, right.
Right, like it's not like everyone in the executive branch is just kind of created the same, and the legislature gets to just move everything now to the auditor. The auditor gets to sign bills. The auditor gets to pardon people. The auditor commands the National Guard, right? But this is the way the Republicans think, right? The Republicans think, well, if we can't do it ourselves, we will find a way to just bust through the way in which constitutional government works, and it will get blessed by a Republican court. Well, at least in this instance, this Republican-dominated court said no, and that is a good day for democracy.
Can you explain to give folks who are watching right now an idea of what North Carolina Republicans are capable of and are willing to do? Can you explain what they sought to do in North Carolina in the state Supreme Court, which I've covered at length on my channel? I know you have covered it at length on Democracy Docket as well. What they've sought to do and the outcome as far as it stands right now.
Yeah. So look, this is about as partisan a legislature as you are going to find anywhere in the country. I mean, these are folks who have gerrymandered not in secret, but actually in public. They have boasted about how gerrymandered their maps are, and they take pride in it. This is a legislature that changed the nonpartisan election for state Supreme Court to partisan elections. I mean, who does that? Who decides, you know what the problem with our state Supreme Court is? It's elected, but it's not partisan elections. So they made them
partisan enough. Yes, we need more partisanship among our good judges, right?
Right. And I mentioned that in this instance, they shifted the power from the governor, not to the Secretary of State, because that's a Democrat, not to the Attorney General, because that's a Democrat, but to the auditor. And that's the way they think. So what's happened in this state Supreme Court election is there was a very close election for a state Supreme Court seat. The Republicans controlled the state Supreme Court. And the Democrat won. Democrat won the seat. It would still, by the way, be a Republican-controlled state Supreme Court. It would be a 5-2 court. But that wasn't good enough for them. They wanted it to be 6-1. Presumably, they want it to be 7-0. But the Republican candidate who lost sought a recount. The Democrat won again. They sought another partial recount. The Democratic candidate won again. And then what happened is the North Carolina Republican Party, the Republican National Committee, and this candidate, Jefferson Griffin, they filed a lawsuit to disenfranchise 65,000 voters. 65,000 for an election decided by 735 votes. They want to disenfranchise 65,000 people. And
cherry picked, by the way, from 4 overwhelmingly Democratic counties.
That's right. They came up with 3 buckets of reasons to disenfranchise these voters. All 3 reasons are basically the voter followed the instructions that were given by the state. They followed the instructions given by their counties. They followed the instructions on the form. But the Republicans don't think that those votes ought to count. So what they did is they went and found 3 buckets and then only targeted 4 counties. They targeted Durham County, where Duke University is, a very blue county. They targeted Forsyth and Guilford counties, which are essentially where the triad is. Winston-Salem, you have several universities there, Wake Forest, among others. And then they targeted the county where Asheville is, sort of a blue dot in the middle of red. And those are the only counties. They didn't seek to disenfranchise voters for the same reasons in any of the other counties, just those counties. And so this went up to the state Supreme Court. The Supreme Court rejected part of it, said, no, we're not going to disenfranchise one category, but adopted disenfranchising the other 2 and said those voters are going to have to cure their ballots. And then it went to federal court in a case that the Democratic candidate, Allison Riggs, brought. My law firm, representing a group of individual citizen and groups, filed a parallel lawsuit and said, no, this violates the federal constitution. You cannot disenfranchise voters for following the rules that they were told by the state after the fact and then change the rules of the election. And just recently, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals put on hold, blocked the remedy that the state Supreme Court had suggested or had issued an order on while the federal courts review this. So I am hopeful that the federal courts are going to block this, but this is a ruthless group. And, this is what the Republican National Committee is up to. While we are all, among Democrats, while we are all fighting and paying attention to what Donald Trump is doing in Washington, D.C., as we have to, as we must, as we need to with every fiber in our being, the RNC's massive voter suppression war machine grinds on. And it is grinding on in North Carolina to try to steal this state Supreme Court seat, to try to pass this law that takes the governor's authority and gives it to the auditor. These tactics we are seeing in state after state. In Indiana, they are going after students. In Montana, they are passing a voter suppression law. We're seeing this all throughout the country. It's why Democracy Docket tracks this stuff. It's why they report on it. It's why my law firm and I litigate it.
I want to talk about the precedent that this would set if the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals didn't block the cure process from going on. So right now, there is a cure process for a small amount of ballots that was stopped in its tracks. If they allowed that to go on, then that basically does establish some precedent that other states across the country could rely on when they decide, okay, you know what, we here in Pennsylvania want to discard ballots or challenge ballots just from Philadelphia. In Wisconsin, we want to challenge ballots in Milwaukee. In Michigan, we want to challenge ballots just from Detroit. And so, can you talk on the significance of the fact that, as of right now, at least, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals has blocked this from becoming precedent, where now you can just cherry pick ballots that you don't want counted, and you can figure out a way to establish some type of cure process where the onus then falls on the voters to go back and cure ballots that were cast correctly and legally.
It has been the top priority of the Republican Party ever since Donald Trump in 2020 went to court to say the election may be over, but I still get to change the rules. That's what Donald Trump did in 2020. It is what Republicans tried to do in 2022. It is what Republicans were prepared to do at the presidential level in 2024. What we are seeing in North Carolina in this state judicial election is the Republicans executing that playbook. They were blocked from doing it in 2020, so there was no precedent. They were blocked from doing it in 2022, so there was no precedent. They are trying to do it in this judicial election in North Carolina because if they can get the federal courts to bite off on this radical theory, a theory that led to Republican lawyers being sanctioned in 2020, if it is now blessed in 2024, this is going to be the playbook that we are going to see in every election moving forward. In every election they lose in the midterms in 2026, in every race they lose in the presidential in 2028, they will say, we will wait for the votes to be cast, for the votes to be tabulated, and only then we will decide what we think the rules will be. And we'll go to court, and if we can find a favorable judge, they will bless it. We have to stop this now. We have to stop this before it gains any traction. And we have to all be paying attention to this as one of our top priorities.
Perfectly put. Mark, let's finish off with this. If you're in North Carolina and you've seen the way in which Republicans have gerrymandered their legislature and also the congressional delegation, how do you have any faith that North Carolinians can ever have equal or fair representation again, seeing the ways in which these North Carolina Republicans will abuse and wield power to their political advantage?
Look, my message to the voters of North Carolina, and for that matter across the country, is this. Republicans are going to try to cheat. Republicans are going to try to suppress your vote. Republicans are going to try to promote election deniers and put them in positions of power to try to rig the outcomes. Okay, we know that. We know that Donald Trump is going to support them every step of the way with the full power of the federal government. But you need to not give up hope. You need to understand that there are lawyers out there who are fighting every single day for free and fair elections and to make sure your vote counts. There are news outlets like what Brian does, like what Democracy Docket does. Every single day, they are not corporate owned, they're not corporate controlled, they do not bow down, they do not obey, they do not look to make compromises with Donald Trump and the Republicans. And they will keep you informed on what is happening. So there are lawyers fighting, there are news outlets reporting, and your part is to not let Donald Trump win by making you be discouraged, by you giving up, by you believing your vote won't count, and by you staying home. Every one of us has an obligation to be an active participant in democracy. That means people like Brian, who have 4+ million people hanging on his every word. It means people like me who try to speak out and also try to go to court to make sure you're protected. But it also means you doing your part, talking to your friends, your family, your neighbors, telling them not to give up hope and to make sure they are speaking out against what we're seeing from Donald Trump and the Republicans. And it means making sure that they and you are all registered to vote and that you vote not just sometimes, not just in the big ticket elections, but in every single election. Because ultimately, if we all do that, we will beat them at the ballot box and we will restore American democracy.
Perfect place to leave off. Again, for those who are watching right now, to support the invaluable work that Mark and his team are doing, engaging in fearless independent journalism, please sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.